friends and strangers and real estate clients. I wanted to, I'm Sonia Curtis, a real estate broker with S. Curtis Properties. I've been in real estate for over 18 years in the Los Angeles area. And I just wanted to talk to you about that real estate settlement from the NAR settlement and National Association of Realtors with the cooperating broker commission. So what people don't know is that about 30 years ago, there was only one agent hired to list properties and work for the seller. And they got the full 5 or 6. Back then, it was at least 6% on average commission to sell the house. Then what happened is buyers who were purchasing properties felt underrepresented. They didn't have somebody advocating for them to negotiate. They felt like it was unfair because the seller's agent was the one getting all the money, and they were advocating more for the seller, from the seller's payment going to the seller's agent, So the buyers protested and said, hey, we're underrepresented. So the California Association of Realtors and the brokers agreed to pay a cooperating broker commission. And what that meant was the listing agent could break off half of their commission or whatever percent they want. We can't price fix because that goes against the anti-Sherman trust law. We've never been able to fix a price for a commission, but there is something called industry standard where there's a cost for us to do business, and there's a liability, and there's our time and expertise. Just like anybody that goes to work, you get paid for your work and your expertise, right? So after all of our expenses, and because of the nature of real estate being more litigious, we have to pay insurance and business insurance and a lot more fees just to be in real estate. Nobody pays for that but the agents, by the way, or the brokers. So we're self-employed. We also don't have a 401 C3, whatever that is, 401k, that thing, for when you retire. See, I don't even know what it is because I'm self-employed. So anyways, the point is buyers felt unrepresented. So what they agreed to do was split the commission with the selling agent, the listing agent, with the buyer's agent. They said, we will give half our commission to any good agent who brings the buyer, and we close a successful deal and close escrow. So now the buyer is in possession of that property, right? They recognize it takes cooperation. And because the buyer's agents have to be compensated for their time and their knowledge and expertise, and a good buyer's agent will go to inspections with their buyers. They will know what to look out for. They will negotiate price points and negotiate repairs and credits. A good buyer's agent is very important, and it's just business, right? If you list your property for sale and it's open to the market, and you have in a seller's market 50 buyers coming in, you want to work with an agent and a buyer who's serious, who's going to pay well, who's no nonsense, who's professional, who's going to sign everything on time and get the paperwork back on time so there's no delays for your client. You don't want to take a property off the market for someone who's not actually going to close the deal. So there's a benefit to both sides to have a buyer's agent representing the buyer and a seller's agent representing the seller. Now, what has happened with this commission lawsuit settlement is that it has given realtors a bad name. It has given the impression that we don't earn our keep, that we're overpaid, and that it was misrepresented that the sellers were directly paying the buyer's commission. That's not how it worked. I just explained it. Sellers paid their agent, their broker, to sell their home. And then the broker agreed, because the buyers hadn't been represented before, to share half of the commission or whatever is agreed upon, but it was customary to split it in half and share half with whoever represented the buyer. That way buyers were now represented and covered. And it was like an equal playing field, and it created competition in the marketplace. So it wasn't just let the buyer beware, it was they were protected too. Okay, so that was actually a great solution that was non-greedy. But what happened is they misrepresented us. And they said, oh, and I have a feeling the people behind this are just cash investors and corporate investors, big companies that want to replace humans with AI technology. And in the beginning, look, I'm a consumer. I understand saving money. I want to save money too. I don't want to waste my money if I don't have to. But see, here's the problem. You're not wasting your money being properly represented by a good broker, or the realtor is the sales agent that works with a brokerage. So if you have somebody good at their job, they're gonna, as a buyer's agent, they're gonna get you a good property. They're gonna make sure that you are aware of any issues in the property. They're going to suggest you do your inspections. They're going to make sure all the paperwork is done, that the seller has to disclose things that they know about for you to have that knowledge. So see, what's happening is they've basically, this commission lawsuit cut out buyer's agents, because now the sellers are saying, oh, we don't have to pay that other half. We'll give our agent 2.5% or 3% or whatever's the bottom line for one side, just to represent one party. And then the sellers are saying, well, let the buyers pay their own, agent fee, which would seem fair, except for the fact that buyers are the ones that have to come up with a huge down payment. They have closing costs too, escrow title fees, but they have to have a down payment to get their loan. And they're usually on a very tight margin, because the lender requires not only savings to show 6 months of reserves to pay the mortgage, title, taxes, insurance, all that for 6 months to close, but they also want your income to debt ratio to be real good. And so to get this house as a buyer, you usually are very tight financially, and you're not getting all the money for the sale of the house. You're putting 20% down, 10%, even for some people it's hard to put 3.5% down. So you're putting down a significant amount of money to buy the place, plus you have to have your reserves. Most buyers don't have, again, on average, about 2.5% or 3% left to pay their agent's commission. So this other way, the old way, really worked to cover everybody. But what's happening now is it's kind of kicking the buyer's agents out, unless a buyer can afford to pay their commission, or unless you can negotiate with the seller to pay it. But ultimately what happens is sellers will then say, I'll only pay it if the buyer will offer more to cover the cost. And if the buyer isn't qualified with their debt to income ratio and have enough reserves to offer more, even if they want the property, this happened to me once, then they can't get it. So the house goes, the escrow gets canceled, and they go back on market. And you have to start all over again from scratch, taking more time, paperwork, and then the longer property's on the market in general, that tends to give a psychological impression that there's something wrong with it or that it's overpriced. So it's not in the seller's best interest to have to cancel in escrow and relist or wait for another offer. So my point is, people don't understand that this is the whole reason why there was cooperating broker commission. The original broker split their commission and offered half to a buyer's agent so the buyers could be represented. It's good for everybody, okay? So I'm just upset about this slander campaign. It's just a bad campaign. And I'm sure that the AI companies, they're the only ones that are really going to benefit, because they will have these online platforms where buyers can just go bid on a property probably, and there'll be a little bit of competition for the bidding war, but what about walking through the property? What about someone who's an expert representing you, who knows what to look out for? And what about hands-on inspections and walking the property? What about knowing the neighborhood and doing their due diligence to make sure that the comps support, that the price you're paying are supported in the comparisons of sales recently in the neighborhood. We have all the tools as realtors to do this for you, and we pay for those tools and we get trained. I have to go through ongoing CE, continuing education credit as a broker. I had to take a whole bunch of courses to renew my broker's license last year. It took about 30 hours or more of my time. You have to really have integrity. You can't be lying, and you have a fiduciary trust to both the seller and the buyer. To stay in business, you have to have integrity and honesty. So there's character that goes into it, there's knowledge, there's experience, and there's expenses. We pay a lot of expenses to be self-employed real estate brokers. So I understand that the average consumer is like, well, I don't care. That's your job. You picked it. I don't want to pay your expenses. Got it. But when you go to buy a car, there's a commission to buy the car. That's the salesperson's gig. That's how they make a living. There's somebody on the showroom to show you the car, to test drive the car, to give you mechanical knowledge about the car, and to negotiate the sales price, So obviously salespeople have been valued through many areas in society, and I don't even consider myself a salesperson really as a broker. I'm more a person who is watching out for my clients, trying to get them the best deal, trying to keep them out of a lawsuit, trying to keep them in a good property, or get them, get their sale price the best they can, because I understand what buyers want and I understand what sellers need. So, and I understand how to protect both parties from unnecessary lawsuits and lack of disclosure. So anyways, I just submit this to you so you understand that the reason there was a cooperating broker commission again is because the buyers had no agents. There was nobody representing them. 30 years ago, we had one agent who got the whole caboodle, one broker. And by the way, the agents that work for the broker, they have to usually give a cut to their broker. And then they also usually pay for their MLS fees, their board fees. I just paid $831 to renew my board membership. I have over $350 a year in MLS membership. I've got real estate signs, 3 little signs. Little ones were $100. Bigger ones are like $100 each. And I have a website to maintain. I have E&O insurance. That was over $700 last month. I have a super key to get you in the door wherever we go. That's like $20 a month. We have a lot of fees to pay. And my own health insurance. And like I said, no retirement. I have to save up my own retirement and pay the taxes, of course. We all have that. But you have to have a good computer, a printer, a phone, a vehicle. You have to have a good vehicle that you can drive far. And just to let you guys know, sometimes buyers, I'll take them to see 50 properties or 100 properties before we find the right one. So it's not like we just snap our fingers and then get a $20,000 commission. What you don't know is we spent a year not getting paid one penny, using our gas, using our mileage on our vehicle, paying our dues, paying all of those things I just mentioned just to stay in the game, taking our time, looking for the properties, booking the appointments, getting our buyers pre-qualified, making sure that they can afford to buy the place, working with lenders, working with inspectors, working with appraisers. We help with so many things, and we could be in several escrows, and then the escrows don't go through for whatever reason, and it's back to ground zero, start all over, before we see $1. So I need you to understand that the way that they are presenting agents to the population is very disconcerting. It's literally, I can tell you myself, my business cut down to 10% of what it was in 2022. 2023, 24, 25. 23 was about half or a third of 2022. 24, it was about a tenth, and 2025 a tenth. I mean, it was bad. So I just need you to understand, we're not greedy, superfluous sharks just feeding off of the poor customers. We're here to help you. We're here to make sure that you're covered. So I hope that this educated buyers and sellers. And as a seller myself, like when I go to sell my house, I would consider paying the buyer's agent because you need a good agent to get the deal done. You need somebody who's serious, that represents the buyer, who, when they are holding the buyer's hand and they can walk them through everything, one, it limits my liability, keeps me that I can mostly serve my seller, but two, you can't lie to the buyer, but you're on one side, you're representing the seller. Then they have someone representing them. So you work together, you cooperate, and to look out for both sides. And then when you close escrow, I would be, if I don't let buyer's agents know up front as a seller that I will pay their commission, there's no impetus to go to work. Why would anybody go to work for free? I ask you right now, if your employer said, hey, I want you to work for the next 2 months, do 10 hours a day, you're gonna drive a lot, you're gonna use your car, your gas. By the way, you have to pay all these self-employed expenses too. But I may or may not pay you. You might not get paid. It depends on how the seller feels. Would you be motivated to work? No. It's just, sorry, nobody works for free. Okay, this isn't our charity, this is our job, this is our career. So I'm hoping that people are going to wake up to this before buyers get screwed over. The other thing I'm seeing is sellers that maybe it's their parents' property or their grandparents' property, or they live in another state and they don't really know that much about the property. So they're going to list the property with a listing agent, but they don't know anything about it. Maybe their parents passed away. That happens a lot. I'm seeing that a lot now, the baby boomers generation. So what happens is the seller doesn't know that much, so they can't disclose that much to the listing agent. The listing agent doesn't disclose that much to the buyer. These cash investors and buyers are going right to the listing agent saying, well, we'll just do it without a commission. We'll just do it without an agent representation. So basically they have to sign a form saying that they absolve the listing agent from all liability because they're being unrepresented. But the listing agent still has to fill out forms and do work, and you still can't lie. So you by fiduciary duty, you still can't. You're still basically representing both people, but you can't do as good of a job. So what's happening is these investors are buying these properties cheaper because there's no competition, because you're not listing the property on the market. You're just selling it directly to these cash investors off market. So they're getting a good deal. Then they buy it and they don't care as much about the state of the house. Why? Because they're just going to put lipstick on a pig and turn around and rent it. So now who's going to get hurt are the renters who move into these properties that have not thoroughly been vetted, that nobody knew to disclose the issues. Maybe there was a mold issue from 20 years ago that the grandpa knew about, but he's deceased. The kids didn't know, the grandkids didn't know. No, it's not that the sellers were doing anything wrong to not disclose. They simply didn't know. The listing agent didn't know. The buyers didn't know, but they don't care because they're not paying someone to represent them properly, and they're just cash shark investors who just want to buy it on the cheap and flip it to make a profit, or do the rentals, like I said. So now you've got houses on the market that are not safe, and that unless an inspector is able to really get under the wood and under the paint and under things that you can't. Inspectors, when you hire them, they don't break open walls to look at the existing plumbing to see if there was a leak. There could have been a leak, and it could have had mold. And if nobody dealt with it, nobody knew about it now, and somebody just put a fresh coat of paint on it, you buy a house thinking it looks great, and it passed all the inspections, but it's actually got a mold problem. Or it could have a foundation issue, or it could have cracks that keep coming back, but they covered it up right before they put it on the market. And again, if you try to sue the seller for that, they're like, well, I didn't know, I didn't live in the house. You can't sue the seller. You can't sue the selling's broker, the listing agent broker, because they didn't know. They didn't live in the house. They can only tell you what they know from, visual inspection, from the professional inspector, and from the sellers telling them what's going on. So beware. I predict that this is going to hurt a lot of people, not just us realtors who are getting our income cut and who are being wrongly maligned and we're being presented as unnecessary. So I just know people that sold a place and they sold it for 50 to 100K below what we could have got for them based on the current market. And if you put it on the open market with competition, you're going to give yourself the opportunity to have more than one buyer come. And when more than one buyer comes, at the same time, you've got what's called a bidding war. And then may the best buyer win, right? You have more leverage. So if you just put it directly to an investor without putting it on the market, you're not, in my opinion, that's not the best way to get the highest dollar for your property. And it's historically true. And, you by cutting out that realtor, let's just use that 2.5% number. Like I said, we're not allowed to fix, but if everybody is selling a car, the same car on the street, and they're willing to sell a car for the same percentage, then you would be stupid to charge double the percentage. You're not going to get the business. But if you charge too little, you're not going to be able to survive and cover your business. That's why there tends to be around the same commission offered for different, brokerages, because we all know our bottom line. We're not willing to work for free. We're not willing to pay all of our expenses and take on the liability without being compensated properly, and share our experience and knowledge without being compensated, and do the work without being compensated. That's fair. It's our job. But yeah, if you don't pay those buyers' commissions, the buyer agent commissions, and the buyers want to just let themselves beware, they are taking on properties that probably have not been properly vetted and inspected and disclosed about, especially these cash investors. Like I said, they don't care. They just want to make money. It's all about money. So it's just ironic that they've somehow turned that against us and made it be like it's all about money for us. No, we just want to get paid for our career, for our job, just like anybody does. That's not greedy. And I explained why sellers paid the one agent all the commission, and then the broker split the commission with the buyer's agent. It was to cooperate, to help the buyers feel represented. But now you're trying to get us to do all the work for half the price. We're not going to be able to stay in business, except for, guess who will? The AI platforms. But you're not going to get that same human experience and expertise. It's going to be like a cookie cutter machine. And if it comes to buying the biggest investment of your life, your home, and where you're going to live, your health, your safety, your peace of mind, you want to have people in your corner to protect you. All right. I hope that made sense. Thank you for listening.